Hello everyone and welcome back to the Game Emporium and Top of the Box, where some friends have gathered around the table to talk about some board games. For the last time that we're doing a timed list, kind of. Well, there's some more stuff
at
coming
least
out in the
for
future.
maybe for a year.
At least for a little bit. Maybe we'll do a looking forward to 2024 list, and maybe we'll do a retrospective of before 2025. But here we are. My name is Luke, that is Ross.
Hey,
And we are coming to the end of our favourite games of a particular year series. And we are into just last year, 2023. We've gone all the way from when I started in the hobby at 2015. Geez, I almost said 2025 then. That's not how time works. And we've come up the following 8 years? 9 years?
Yes.
It's 8 years forward, but it's 9 years of... It's 9 videos anyway. Of different games, which have fed into our top... We're going to be playing these top games, and we'll have a little recap of that at the end of the video once we know what our 2023 choices are. I'm intrigued about this list because I was talking about this a little bit earlier that I don't know how many 2023 games you have played. So it's,
I think there's a few just strong contenders. I don't think I played a wide variety. Well, in fact, I did have that challenge last year to play like 115 new games or something like
that's
that,
true.
which I did get through. So I played a lot of the new games, most of them digitally, most of them only once, to be fair. But
Yes.
I think I've got a strong list. But yeah, I think it was a solid pick out of 8 games rather than a pick from like 20 games sort of situation. I think so.
yeah, I mean, you had that with 2019. That was really not your year because you had you played barely anything, which was bizarre.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's the thing. So let's get into this with some honourable mentions. I have 4, and a couple of them I suspect may come up on your list, so I might skip them, or I might just mention them briefly by name, and we'll get into them. I'll watch for your reaction. So, in alphabetical order, we have got Apiary, the Space Bees Stonemaier game that came out.
Maybe appearing on my list, yeah.
Maybe.
B.
But yeah, just a fun little engine builder game where you're putting out worker bees and they get a little bit stronger. More on that later, probably. Kun no Hora is a game from CGE that I played.
Sorry, really quickly. Probably? No, that's too much. Too much of a stretch.
Too much of a push. Kun Ora is the next one on my list, which is a game from CGE, which is a whole market game around the City of Silver and the progression of how you build up this civilization based on that silver trade is really interesting. The little engine that is used, or the little computer that's used to track the values, is really interesting. So I want to give that a few more plays. I've only played it once. I think it's a game you would really enjoy.
Probably.
Because it's the sort of thing that you would enjoy. So yeah, it's real.
We'll add it to the list.
We'll
I did actually think this earlier. I need to actually, talking of challenges a little bit, I should add an extra challenge, which is the games which Luke says that I would enjoy, and then we keep adding to the list. I should actually add to a list.
Make a list, yeah.
We remember to actually play them, because I mean, it's going to be a very long list, but
it is.
Anyway,
but
sorry, I keep interrupting your.
It's a good list.
Honourable mentions.
All good. You shouldn't interrupt me on this one because it's a solo-only game. It's Legacy of You from Garfield Games. This is just an interesting solo campaign story mode where you're just playing, building out the rivers in the ancient times of ancient Chinese cities, and you is the architect of these canals. You're just dealing with barbarians and all sorts of fun little random events that come up. I think it's really interesting. It's a really neat system. I keep getting destroyed by it, but I'm doing okay so far. Doing okay. And finally, it's Sky Team, which is a game that I think may come up a little bit later.
May be coming up on my coming up on my list later on.
It may come over the horizon. Sky Team, which is a 2-player cooperative game where you're trying to fly and land a plane, basically. And we've been playing a lot of it. So, more on that a little bit later on, I suspect. Those are my honourable mentions. What have you got?
Awesome. I've got 2 honourable mentions, which are actually older games, which got a makeover, which I think one of them maybe, I don't know whether you've considered it or not, was La Granja is one of them.
The La Granja Deluxe set. It hasn't come up on mine because I've only ever really played that as the old version on BGA.
Yes. So, but very pretty version of a quite good game actually, and we played it quite recently. Yours actually. So yeah, quite good game. And the other one as well is Castles of Burgundy, which is sitting somewhere above my head. Again, old game, fancier version. But I just thought I'd mention them, but they didn't really deserve to be on the list because they are just fancier versions of the older games. So I'm not even going to cover them that much.
There might be a fancy version of an older game coming up on my list later, but we'll worry about that when we get to it.
Sure. Shake That City was on my honourable mentions. So kind of load some cubes in, give it a little shimmy. I love the mechanism with the actual physical mechanism of like you press the thing and it drops all the cubes. That's just really fun to play with. And then you basically add them to you pick a colour and you have to add the. You know what? Is it going to come up on your list by any chance?
It isn't, but you pick a colour of cubes that you want to take, and then you build those out into your thing for particular patterns. But you have to do it in the shape that they came out in. And it's just, you're trying to score different points for the different types of cities you're building in. Really nice AEG game. Quite a small box, but good fun.
Yeah, I was getting into explaining it, then maybe I'm over-explaining it and I don't need to be. But yeah, excellent. And then two more. Literati, which is a word-making game, essentially, where you're working as a team to battle the illiterati who are trying to destroy letters and words, basically. So you have a bunch of words, and then you have a goal, and once you've done your goal, then you have like a team goal. So you're just trying to make words and swap letters between each other using those cards. And something bad, like it happens, like it might be like remove all the E's, or remove the third letter in each of your words if you have a four-letter word or something like that. And then you have to then try reconstruct. A good game again, but yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. Good game. And then the last one is Septima, which we've played digitally. I've recently got a nice fancy copy of it. A beautiful game. I just need to play it again, really, for it to even attempt to creep into the list. But yeah.
It was a while ago since we played it. It was like middle of last year.
Yes. I've attempted 3 times to bring it somewhere to be played, and I've not played it yet. The main reason, actually, just a tiny little bit more insight on that, because I'm probably going to talk about this game again at some point, is the rule book is a slog. It's like 30 pages long, and it's not even, and it's great because they give loads of examples, but it's a bit of a slog. So I'm a bit nervous about teaching it. I think that's been the thing where I've been like, oh, actually, don't have the confidence to be like, hey, let's play this game. But
yeah, it's a bit of a dense teach, but there's videos out there, so we can give that a go.
Exactly.
Cool. Let's get into it then with our games of 2023.
Yes. So, I started off with a sentence. So my number 5 is Distilled.
Okay.
5. So, a game all about making booze, essentially. So it's quite good. It's got quite a good sort of deck building element to it a little bit, where you're pulling together a group of cards, you shuffle them all up, you take the top and bottom card off, and then whatever's left, what you've distilled essentially from your deck, is the alcohol that you've made. So you can gamble a little bit. You can play within that system a little bit on what ingredients you include. Try to ensure that you're making a certain type of alcohol, and then you have your own, I guess, like brewery or what. I don't know what they call it for more like the spirit world. I can't think of the word. Probably is still a brewery.
Here's a distillery.
Distillery. That would make sense. A distillery. You have a distillery with your own helpers who give you some powers. You can have certain barrels which change the quality of the alcohol. You have certain bottles which change the pricing of an alcohol, essentially. So you've got a couple of things which add some variation to it. It's just a really good game. It's slightly. It's not slightly. It sits in that weird quasi thing where it's just a little bit complex, that you couldn't just introduce someone who's just a bit more casual on the gaming, but not really, really heavy that you're like, yeah, let's book some time in to sit down and play this game. So it sits in that weird no man's land between those two.
Sure.
Which means it probably doesn't get played that often, but yeah, good game. It is a good game.
Yeah, I like the concept of it, and I like the descriptions of how the different mechanisms sort of flow together. I've not played it yet. I might get a go at it at Aircon. I think it is in the library, so I might try and get it off the library.
I would recommend it.
Give it a go. So definitely one to keep an eye out for. It's on my want to play list. My number 5 is a very easy to play. It's quite the opposite of yours, actually. It's very easy to table, very easy to play, very quick game, and I think it's a perfect game for an introduction to a game night to sort of get people in the mood for playing things. This is Fit to Print. So Fit to Print is a newspaper building game. Effectively, it's a tile placement game where you are rushing around as anthropomorphic animals trying to place these tiles out into your newspaper. But the newspaper has particular rules about how you can lay things out. So you're basically doing this in a rush because news travels fast and you need to make sure you're there to print so that you're in there for your Friday, your Saturday and your Sunday deadline, and paper sizes changes depending on the day you're on. You have your centerpiece, which you pop down in the middle of it when you're laying everything out, which will give you certain points. You'll be grabbing news articles and pictures and throwing them onto the board and just trying to, you get them onto your desk basically, and then you have to put them into your board to go, okay, this is how it's going to lay out and fit in place. But it's all timed. It's a race against the clock and each other. So you've got, depending on the mode you want to play it in, you've got 3 to 5 minutes, I think, is the sort of general range.
Yeah.
To just grab the pieces, put them out, and then lay them out. And they're all pretty straightforward rectangles. So you feel like, oh yeah, this is easy. I'll be able to fill this space out easy. It's not that easy when you're rushing around because you forget, A, what's there, because you also have to balance the mood of the paper. You don't want to be too heavily weighted towards the sad or the happy. You have to try and keep a nice balance. You want to make sure there's pictures in there. Articles of the same colours can't touch.
Pictures not near each other. Articles of the same type not near each other. And just balance that as well. Yeah.
So all sorts of little shenanigans that go on there. And of course, there's never quite the tile that you need that will fill in that space perfectly. So you have areas of blank space, which will be negative points for you depending on the size of it. So you have to be really careful about it. I really enjoy this. We played it first on Tabletopia a long time ago with Paula Deming and Dom, and we just had a real blast with it. And we took it on the Stag, and we're just like, right, everyone, we can just play this. It'll be done like in half an hour at most, and then we can just crack on and do whatever else we want to do. I think it's a really good, light little party game. I think it's good fun.
It's going to appear maybe slightly higher on my list. The trap that I always fall into with this game is because it happens in phases. So you collect all your articles that you're putting in your newspaper, and then because you're then putting it onto your newspaper, you go, "Oh, I've got like a huge stack of articles or photos or whatever. This is going to be fun. I'm going to fill this paper so easy." Or you go the other way. You've got loads of it'll be fine, and you come to do it and you've got either nowhere near enough things to fill your newspaper, or you've way overestimated. It's actually it's really funny because you think on the human mind, it's really easy to track how much space you need to fill with something else, but as soon as it's broken into smaller components, it just becomes a nightmare, along with all the rules about the placement stuff and obviously making that much harder. I've had a lot of fun playing this with quite variety of different groups. The thing I haven't tried yet, which I really want to try, is the team mode, where you have one person sat at the desk who's basically putting all the news articles in, and then someone else who's physically having to run from one side of the room to the other, or to a different table essentially, to collect the news stories and bring them back, go out and get the scoop and come back. Obviously that adds a little bit more thematics to it, but also it sounds like it'd be way more chaotic. So
I kind of like the idea of that, though. It feels like the sort of thing you could do at a convention, where you just get, like, if you've got 12 people together, just go, okay, we're going to split into reporters and editors, and we're just going to go from there. That sounds like fun. Yeah. I really want to give that a go at some point. Maybe I'll take it to Aircon. We'll do it that way. But yeah, so that's our number 5 games, and possibly a spoiler into a further one on Ross's list. So we'll see where we go. Let's get into our number 4s. All right, my number 4. We said we were talking about a deluxe-ish version of an older game. My number 4 game is Thunder Road Vendetta.
Yes,
which is not technically a new game. Technically, it is a new game. It's a reprint of a older game by Restoration Games, where basically it's Mad Max the board game. You are driving cars along a track, trying to race to the finish, and you're crashing into each other's cars, you're shooting them, you're doing all sorts of different damage to them, and it's a dice placement selection, dice selection thing. You roll your 4 dice, you can then assign them to your different cars, you can assign one to a power, so you either get a nitro boost or to deploy a helicopter to attack the other cars. And as you're driving along, you can slam into other people's cars and roll a collision die, see what happens. You can bump people off the track. You can bump them into a wall, which would eliminate the car. You could bump them into their own cars, and then that has a collision. And then you have this really fun chain of events of things that just happen. And it's just a really fun little game. It's just one of those things you can go, oh yeah, we'll just pop it out on the table, we can get it go. I've only really played it at 2, and it's a lot of fun with 2. I want to try it at 4. Because I imagine with 12 cars on the track, it's just going to be chaos. And I like that a lot as a concept. There is an element of, in the 2-player game, you only race over 5 pieces of track. But in a 3 or 4-player game, you race until someone's eliminated, and then you kind of finish off that piece of track, which I think is a good way to do it, because if you're going to have player elimination, at least make it so that the portion that you eliminated is very short.
Yeah.
This game is one that took a while to get across to the UK, and it's still sort of quite difficult to come across. There's a new Kickstarter coming out later this year for expansion stuff, and I'm intrigued to see where that goes. I need to play with the base game a lot more, to be honest, to see how that goes, but it looks like a lot of fun is foretold in the future. Yeah, it's a blast. I really like it. I'm hoping to play it on Sunday at 4.
It's been on the list of things to play at some point. But yeah, it seems like it captures that wasteland racing kind of vibes very well. Which is good, because you could end up with just like, I don't know, any racing game where you're just moving pieces around, right? But it's all
Formula
about the
D or
explosion and bumping
thing,
each other, and what the chaos that comes out is the key bit, really.
Yeah,
awesome.
It's good. It's a good one.
So with my number 4, sort of a bit cheeky maybe. So technically the release date was late last year, but I didn't actually receive it until like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, or something like that.
It's fine.
So I thought close enough. Oh, as in like, because this is a Kickstarter, so it wasn't delivered to me until then. But
we're going with the dates that are on BGG as the release date. So.
Yes. Mythwind. So very new pickup from me. So Mythwind is. I'm almost tempted. I mean, it is a game, but I'm almost tempted to not really describe it as a game, because there's no points necessarily in it. It's literally just about having a nice time. You've got some sort of direction and story that you're following mostly, but it's not like most legacy campaign games, which this is, where you're like, oh, well, ultimately we're trying to, like, I don't know, complete it, basically. I guess you could eventually get through all of the story cards and get to the end. I mean, that would be a thing. But essentially, in Mythwind, you have just arrived at a valley, the Valley of Mythwind, and you take on a role of, there's 4 options in the base game, and there's a 5th one as part of an expansion. Taking the role of like an occupation essentially in that town, and that means that you have your own mini game really to be playing, and then you will contribute resources then to the wider town, help all build buildings, go on adventures and explore stuff. So play this with my other half. She plays the farmer because that was the least complex, even though that was the one that I really, really wanted to try out. But it's basically, I'll give you an example of the minigame. The farmer is essentially you're placing tiles in a farm, and then so you have to take an action to plant, an action to tend, then you can like flip it, and it's all about your farm starts off with loads of untamed land that you're trying to pay coins basically to remove, but then also plant your crops and then get them to strawberries, get them to that maximum quality you can, sell them, so then you have more money, so you just create this engine basically. And I played a ranger, which essentially is you go out exploring and you have to be bring items with you to be as prepared as you can, and then hopefully you've lined them up in the order of the bad things that are happening to you essentially, and then you then convert your items into I think there's a different word for it now. Other items. So you have a map that you can switch into a compass. I think it is. That's more valuable, basically, or you can spend it to then be able to see in the future where you might be exploring. So there's quite a good variety in that. But yeah, it's just a very chill game. The beauty of it is obviously it's campaign. You can fully resettable. You can have people drop in and drop out. You can switch characters at the end of every season.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of freedom there, basically. But stuff carries over.
From what I hear from it, it also doesn't have the same as like a Pandemic Legacy, where the story ends at the end of the 12th month, right? It has you can kind of just stop when it's a natural reset point. So I'm intrigued by this. I want to give it a go once you've finished, treating your wife to it.
Yes.
And we'll see how that gets a chance into.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that is our number 4, so let's get into our number 3s.
So my number 3, I don't really need to talk about because you've already covered it off. It's Fit to Print.
Hey,
so
it's good.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, we said a lot of stuff already about it. It was a really solid game when I was putting the list together. It just feels that niche for me now. I think really where I'm like, we've got lots of players, and we need a quickish game for everyone to learn, and it sits nicely in that alongside like stuff like cartographers for example.
Yeah.
So
it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to throw out loads more. We've already covered off quite a lot.
Yeah, cool. Straight into my number 3 then. My number 3 is a really small card game, which is just all about memories, and it has no right to be as fun as it is, but the experiences I've had on this just sort of tipped it over Fitprint and Thunder Road as a top game of this year, and it is That's Not a Hat. So this is a game which is all about remembering the gifts that you're given. So you've each got a card in front of you which has got a gift on it in sort of like line drawing style, and the start of the game, someone will gain a card, and they'll go, oh, I've got too many gifts now, so I need to flip one over and pass it on in whichever direction the arrow says to go into. You'll pass it along and say, this is a carrot. And you'll pass it on to the person on your right, and they will flip over their card that they had to go face down, and they will pass it on in whichever direction it is and say, this is a bicycle. And so on and so forth, and it'll go around. And you'd think that 4 reasonably intelligent adults, all with degrees and complex technical jobs, would be able to remember 5 things on a table that are just moving around. But no, we cannot remember where these things are supposed to be and who has what. And it is just ridiculous to just go, well, hang on a minute, I thought that was the bicycle. I thought the carrot's over here. But you're saying that that's the carrot? It's just fun, silly fun.
Unravels very quickly, right?
It does, yeah. And you just sort of, over the round, I mean, we played it slightly wrong the first few times we played it, where we just reset the entire cards. But actually what you're supposed to do is just, when the round ends, you remove the card that has been, if someone challenges you and says that's not what you say it is, then it's either goes into their, goes as their points, which you want to have the fewest of at the end of the round. When someone gets 3 points, then the game's over. But you just add a new card into it, which means you've still got the items that were in play, but you may have already forgotten where they are, but you've now got a new secret thing, as opposed to a whole set of new things that are coming in. So it's a good little mental puzzle from Ravensburger that, again, has no right to be as fun as it is, but it is just silly fun. And it's just quick. It's a quick little filler game that can just melt your brain, which for no reason other than it just is great.
Yeah, and it's... I think there's a good spot for memory games. I think a little, which essentially is in that filler slot, because it's you don't have to think about the strategy necessarily. You just have to be able to. It's based on your own human skill more than anything, right? So
yeah. It's kind of like that. It fits into the same sort of niche as something like Trio or Nana, as it's the other title is. But yeah, it's that sort of memory game is quite good fun. Cool. Well, that's a very quick rattle around our number 3 games. So let's get into our number 2s. So my number 2 game is a game that I am frustrated I still don't have it, and this is Darwin's Journey.
Okay.
So Darwin's Journey is a game where you are basically trying to replicate and follow in the footsteps of Charles Darwin, where for some reason there was a whole lot of Darwin-themed games came out last year. I don't know why. I don't know if it was an anniversary of the Beagle sale or something, but it just happened to be. There was a lot of Darwin games in 2023. But you're going around the Galapagos, you're rediscovering animals and fossils and all sorts of little artifacts. But the way that the worker placement works is that each of the workers has a seal that they are trained in, effectively. And you have to move those around, and they can only go to those specific seals or specific locations for that type of action. And you have to then try and train up your workers over the course of the years to gain more skills so that they can go to different places. You can move them about so that they get a certain hierarchy of skills. The more skilled they are, the more effective they are at the action. It's a really good, crunchy Euro game where you are just trying to get points from a particular strategy and trying to get as many points as you can. I've played it once. I absolutely loved it, and I pre-ordered it because I know it was coming from the Kickstarter last year, and it's now shipping out. And for whatever reason, copies just aren't coming across to the UK at the moment. I think it's, there's going to be some stuff that's happening in the world that is more important and is causing problems with the shipping. But my friend went to Essen and he got me all the expansions, and I was like, oh no, it's fine. I've got the base game is coming at the end of next month. It's not a worry. Don't worry about it. Don't pick it up for me. I am now 4 months later going, man, I wish I'd asked him to pick it up then instead of waiting for it to be shipped to us. Because I know it's not just the particular store that I've gone to. It's a general issue that it's not coming across here. So it's one of those things. It happens in the gaming industry. I'm just sat here waiting for it. I'm sat by the window. I'm doing the thing with Chandler, just staring out the window as the rain falls down, waiting for Darwin's Journey, waiting for the Beagle to come back into dock.
There was a lot of hype around this game when it first got released, and then it went very quiet. But I think it was one of those games where it was like a lot of hype because there's a lot of a very core group of fans who then were like, "We love this game," and then they disappeared. But they didn't disappear in the sense that the game started falling off. They just became this very niche group, I think, of people who were like, "This is a really good game, and we want to keep playing it." So I heard a lot of good things about it on that initial release, essentially. But there was a weird flux of Darwin-related games.
Yeah, in the footsteps of Darwin, Darwin's Journey. There was there was a bunch of them that came out last year. I don't know why, but it is what it is. Anyway,
it is what it is. Talking of no, I don't really. I was going to try to come up with a really tenuous. Talking of Darwin and evolution, how about bees that evolve into spacefarers?
Yeah,
I did it. I got the link. I got the tenuous link.
You got it.
In my number 2 slot is Apiary, which is basically also known as bees in space. So in Apiary, you all are running your own hive, which is essentially a spaceship. It's a really good worker placement game where you have a bunch of actions on the main board. You place down your bee, typically of 1 or 2 strength to start with, and then if someone else bumps that bee, it gets knocked off, and then you can strengthen it up basically, so then it becomes a 1 to 2 or a 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, etc. Bee. When you place a 4 power bee, you get to usually do some extra powerful ability on that action. And then if that 4 power bee gets bumped, then 4 strength bee, probably a better word, that gets bumped, then it goes into hibernation. Definitely doesn't die, just goes into lovely hibernation. Anyway, and then it goes in, and then you get to put a marker down, get a little bit of a bonus, and basically when you've played all of your hibernation markers, or you've filled all the hibernation marker spaces, the game's over. But in amongst all of that is a really good engine where you have your spaceship, which is your hive. You're buying tiles to essentially create that engine. So there's 3 different types of tiles, which are either farms, which means you can, when you pull your workers back, you can get a bunch of resources and you can store resources on there. There's developments, which basically let you empower usually one of the other spaces. So you go somewhere and you might draw a card or draw additional cards or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have, what is the last one called? I can't remember. The pink ones, which are instant action spaces.
Points,
so you place the tile and you get a one-off bonus, basically. And then you have the very, very, very fancy carve action, which are golden tiles you put in there, which are endgame scoring, essentially, and much harder to do. But it's just bump mechanics really good. The worker placement mechanics really good. The engine building elements, really good. So it's just a good mix where there's no element which really overpowers the others.
No.
And so it feels like quite a smooth game. It's quite you can teach it to someone quite quickly, and then they will pick up the strategy probably relatively fast as well.
Yes, yeah, we played this at Aircon West for the first time, and I think your copy then arrived 3 days later.
Yes,
which was quite funny. But yeah, it's a really good little game, and I do like it. The only knock I have to it, and I think this is just because there's scope for expansion. They wanted to have the base game as being accessible. Is there's a whole load of different ships, 20 different ships that you can have, which give you a asynchronous layout and a different little power that goes in there. But there's only 5 factions.
Yeah.
Which I think is a little bit of a miss. I would have liked there to have been maybe 8. Just 3 more would have made it a little bit more replayable.
Yeah. So the ship maps, there's only enough basically to cover the player count, so you always end up with.
That's it. It's the other way around.
And then it's the factions, which is your starting tile, which you can flip and get a slightly empowered thing. Yeah, I think that's quite important as well to mention around the. It's a Stonemaier game, so it's not dissimilar to what they've just gone through with Tapestry, where they kind of revised all the civs on that and kind of figured out which ones are the powerful ones or not. Because I definitely played recently, and someone had quite a strong ability on there where they were literally paying 1 good, and then they basically kept being able to pull workers back and then gaining more, triggering one of their farms, which basically meant they were gaining more stuff basically off. Versus I think the one which I was playing, which was literally you get 1 victory point for every tile that you build. So at the end of the game, so it's the difference between having a really good engine or just having a few extra points at the end of the game. There's quite a big trade off on that, I think. But it's I agree with you though. I think the ship element, they could have had more expanse on the options around the maps where you're laying the tiles and stuff.
Yeah, I had it in my head the wrong way around. It was the ships that are limited, but there is a load of different civs.
Premises, the point's the same.
The concept's the same. Yeah, the point remains the same. There was a lot of one, not a lot of the other. There we go. Cool. Yeah, I like it. And I know there is an expansion coming out probably later this year, maybe early next year. So there's going to be more. I mean, that box was made for expansions, let's be fair. I think they've learned their lesson with Tapestry. It's like, we can just fit more stuff in here. We can build it from there. But yeah, cool. All right, that's our number 2 games. I'm fairly certain I know what your number 1's going to be. So let's get into it and let's not hold ourselves in suspense any longer.
Sure, my number 1 is SkyTeam. It's the only game I hadn't mentioned probably at this point. So surprisingly, a light game for me to pick as well as my number 1, for the typical sort of stuff. But we played so much of this. It's just a good game. Mm-hmm. It's so what's the word I'm at? It's so simple, but in a nice, like, clean, elegant kind of way. How you do it with a really good co-op experience to it. Because the danger with a cooperative game, in fact, I keep getting too excited again. I'm starting to talk about my feelings on it rather than the games. SkyTeam, you play as a pilot and a co-pilot, essentially trying to land a plane. And what that means is you're rolling dice, 4 of them, and then you are placing them on locations on your cockpit, essentially. So you're trying to hit all your landing gears, all your switches, and you're trying to make sure that your brakes are out and ready. You're making sure that your axis is correct, so you're not basically going to slam your wing into the runway as you land. You're trying to make sure that you're going fast enough to reach the airport, and then not so fast when you come to land that you're basically going to overshoot. So you do all of these things by placing these dice down. But there's an element where before each round you can have a discussion about what you're hopeful that might happen during that. If I roll this 2, I'll put it into my switches, so then we will have we won't move as fast, we won't crash into the planes in front of us, and all this sort of stuff. And then you can't communicate, so then you have to roll your dice, and you take it in turns to place a dice each. And what now going into what I was going to say a second ago is a lot of co-op games you end up with like an alpha game or someone who's like really overpowering who says this is how we will do it. So you take like Pandemic for example, there'll always be someone who will be able to identify, or multiple people who are about to identify the optimum options or actions to take based on the information that you have, and thus if you as an individual don't take those actions, you're going to feel stupid, or you're going to feel like you don't like the game, basically, because then everyone goes, oh, you've ruined it, or hopefully they don't say this, but some people are like, oh, you ruined it because you failed the mission because you didn't do this other action, which would have been a much more thing, or they interject and say, oh, obviously you just move here and you do this thing, and then, well, why have you just taken my turn for me, like, why can't I sit here and work on this puzzle? But obviously with SkyTeam, you can make a plan initially, but that could all go out the window depending on what you roll. We've played a game recently where we're like, hey, right, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we'll do the brakes. So we needed some low numbers for these ice brakes, which are slightly harder to do. But then I'd roll like 3 6s and a 5 or something like that. And we're like, well, I can't do any of that, so I'm going to have to just do as best as I can. And I know that Luke mostly won't have a go at me afterwards because I'll be like, well, I couldn't do it, so I had all these 6s, and then it will be like, okay, whatever, cool, that's fair enough. That's
it worked out. I mean, yesterday, that game we were finishing off, we were just like, oh, God, we've run out of dice to do the things. It's like, well, hang on, if we rearrange this thing, we'll be close, but we can just about manage it if we switch it up a little bit. So it's an interesting little strategy game, and I think it's very much a case of you can fail very early on if you don't get the luck, but there's enough mitigation in the luck. There's different powers that you can do where you can trade dice. There's different ways that you can work it, and you can kind of have a strategy in mind. It just might not pay off for you.
And obviously another perk of it as well is there's a lot of variation. So I think a game which would get boring very quickly if it was literally just everything that I've just described on repetition. But because there's different runways that you're essentially attempting to, or airports you're essentially attempting to land at, ones where you're having to particularly tilt around mountains, or you've got like a fuel leak that you're having to manage at the same time, or you've got headwinds that you're trying to combat. So there's a lot of variation. You mentioned the powers that you can add as well. Again, I fully expect a expansion of some sort, or like the light packaging expansions is kind of what I'm expecting, where it'd be like buy a bulk of like certain runways, something like that.
Here's to make more kind of thing.
It's very easy for them to do that, and I'd expect that really. But Yeah, I mean, it's just, like I say, just really elegant, really well done.
Yeah, I really like it as well. It was on my honorable mentions because I figured it would come up later on your list. I don't have a copy of it, but that's because you have it, and it's on BGA, which has a really smooth implementation of it. So even if the random number generators hate us sometimes, just happens. Cool. My number one game of 2023 is Scholars of the South Tigris.
Yeah.
So this is another dice action selection game where you are trying to transcribe. You're in the 10th century Baghdad, and you are trying to translate the scrolls of wisdom that have come from various places, and you're trying to translate them into Arabic. And the way that you're going to do this is you're going to play down different action cards and then supplement them with dice. And dice that come into play are going to be of a colour and a value. But you've got so much manipulation as to how you can manipulate these dice. You can place them down, and if you've got a white die and a coloured die, they both become the same colour, and it becomes a strength of, let's say you've got a blue, you could have a strength of 8 blue for the power of that action. Or you can mix two primary die together and you get a secondary colour. You could put in a meeple onto a die that matches the colour, and it can either increase the value of that die to a 6, or you can put it onto a different colour and you can make it into a different colour of it. So you can put down a blue worker next to a red die, you can make it into a blue die. So it's all virtual, and it's just a nice bag building game that you're going to build in those dice, shuffle them in, try and get rid of the white dice as much as you can, and you have to try and build this connection of research, so translating these scrolls from Persian to Arabic, or going from Greek, but you might have to go from Greek to Syriac to Persian to Arabic.
Yeah.
And you've got all these different translators you have to try and work on. You've got these different science tracks that you're trying to go up: astrology, psychology, biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And you're just taking the dice and trying to bump up these tracks and just get some stuff going. And I really love how the game plays. It's one of those things that, again, it could get stale, but because it's dice, it's always going to change, and the order in which those people are going to come out and the translators are going to come out, because they don't ever really go away. You can dismiss them and get a little bonus for it, which a lot of Garfield games do. But you just get some really fun combos that can be made from doing those dice, and there's some really nice, satisfying rewards you can get from it. I'm anticipating there'll be an expansion at some point. Garfield games always do. They've made the box bigger. From the West Kingdom games were always a smaller size box, and it's the kind of size box that Garfield tend to do. But these ones in the South Tigris trilogy are larger, which means I think they're just going to go for, these are going to be expansion compatible, which I don't mind with at all. But after a bit of a disappointment for me for Wayfarers of the South Tigris, this was a fantastic return to form for that one. I think later this year they are, in fact probably next month, they are launching their last one in the trilogy, which is Inventors of the South Tigris. So we'll see how that one pans out.
Was it Wayfarers that I've played, isn't it?
I think we tried to play Wayfarers on TTS, and it was playing up the tableau. So yeah, I need to play that one again, because I need to have a better opinion of it. Now we need to play this one. Yeah. So yeah, I really like Scholars. I think it's a really, really good game.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I don't have a lot to say on it. I've not played it, so but I'm keen too. We'll put it on the list. Generally, this is actually going on the list this time. So.
We'll be on the list because we are going to be playing each of the games. We talked about this earlier. Each of the games that were our number one for each of the years is going to be our pick, and we're going to have to play them at some point over this year. We've already made some inlays on this. But we are ensuring that we play them physically, because quite a few of these games are available to play digitally, and we're not going to count those. So, quick rundown for you, for those who want to keep track of the Challenging Keepers accountable. For 2015, I had Raiders of the North Sea, Ross had Viticulture. 2016, I had Terraforming Mars, Ross had Scythe. In 2017, I had Sagrada, which we have already played, and Ross had Twilight Imperium. Now, Twilight Imperium, is a game I don't particularly want to play, and is also going to be a difficult game for us to table at some point. So if we don't get a chance to play Twilight Imperium physically, we are going to put in Ross's, as a backup, we'll put Ross's number 2 game, which was Lisboa. So we'll potentially be Sagrada, Lisboa, or Sagrada, Twilight Imperium. We'll see how the year plays out. 2018, we've already scratched off, which was Architects of the West Kingdom and Quacks of Quedlinburg. We played those fairly recently. 2019 was Paladins of the West Kingdom and Tapestry for Ross. In 2020, Ross had On Mars from Vita Lacerda, and I had The Lost Ruins of Arnak, which I know Ross isn't particularly looking forward to, but we'll
But
see.
we're playing with the expansion, so hopefully
we'll play with the
fix all of my problems with it. That's what I'm pinning on. High expectations.
Or at least some of the problems. I think some of the issues. Let's lower the expectations a little bit. 2021 is where it gets a little weird because my number one game was Final Girl. Ross's was Hadrian's Wall. Final Girl is a solo only game, so we're going to do with my number two, which is Hadrian's Wall. But we can't have Hadrian's Wall twice, so we're going to play Imperium Classics as Ross's number two. So we're both going to be happy, I think, because we both get to play some pretty good games.
Absolutely.
2022 is Ross's Undaunted Stalingrad.
Yes.
And mine is Planet Unknown. And the 2023 picks are Scholars of the South Tigris and Sky Team, which we have already played quite a lot of. And we have played it physically, because we did play it at the pub. So we've got... Yes, so looking at the list, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the games already ticked off of our 18 plays, which is pretty impressive so far. So we'll see how we get on. We'll keep you up to date as we play it. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see, do the subscribe, the follow, the bell, all the bits and pieces that you do. Give us a comments down below on what you think your 2023 games were and which ones we've missed that we haven't played, because we haven't played all of them. We've only played a few of them. So, yeah, cool. Until next time, everyone, thank you very much for watching. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.